Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are really getting into the engine room of a company. We're looking at how they're built, funded, and managed from a financial perspective.
That's right. We're tackling Chapter 4 of the Companies Act 2013. That's the whole framework for share capital and debentures, which is sections 43 all the way to 72.
And for you listening, we're not just reading the sections. The mission today is to treat this like a university class.
Exactly. We need to understand the conceptual logic, the why behind every single rule. If you understand the logic, you don't need to just memorize. You can actually reason through the problems. This stuff is basically the DNA of a company's balance sheet.
It really is. And that logic, it starts with a really fundamental split in how you can give money to a company. The law calls the joint term for these instruments securities.
Right, but they represent two totally different philosophies of investment. On one hand, you've got shares,
That's the ownership interest.
the entrepreneurial side. You take on all the risk. If the company goes down, you lose everything. But, if it becomes the next big thing, your reward is theoretically unlimited.
And the other side of that coin.
That would be debentures. That's a pure lender's interest. You're a creditor, plain and simple.
So your risk is capped.
Your risk is capped and your return is fixed. You get your interest, you get your principal back. You don't get that massive upside. But if things go sideways, you're much higher up in the queue to get paid. Chapter 4 is all about managing the rules for these two very different worlds.
Okay, let's start with the absolute basic unit then, a share. Section 284 defines it as a unit of share capital, and it specifically says it includes stock. But what is a share, really? It's more than just a number, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a bundle of rights, not just a sum of money.
Yeah.
There's a classic case, New London and Brazilian Bank v. Brockle Bank, that made this crystal clear. It said a share is not a sum of money, but an interest that is measured in a sum of money. Think of the face value, say, 10 rupees, as just the ruler we use to measure your slice of the ownership pie. The share itself is the actual contract, the bundle of rights and liabilities.
So the 10 rupee value is just the unit of account.
Precisely.
Which brings up the next question.
Yeah.
If the share is the fundamental unit, why does the law even bother to include stock in the definition? What's the point of stock?
That's a great question because it seems a bit archaic now. Stock is basically a tool for consolidation. It's allowed under Section 61(1)(c). You take a whole bunch of fully paid up shares and you bundle them together into one single fund.
So instead of having 1,000,000 shares of 10 rupees each,
You might have one block of stock worth 1 crore. The key difference is that a share has a nominal face value, per unit. Stock is just a lump sum.
and there's a really important procedural point there, isn't there? You can't just create stock out of thin air.
No, and this is the critical takeaway. Stock is obtained only by conversion of fully paid up shares. A company can never issue stock directly. It was really a tool for administrative convenience in older, massive companies to simplify their share registers. It also allows for fractional transfers, which you can't do with a single share.
Okay, that makes sense. So with that foundation, let's get into the two main kinds of share capital under Section 43.
The two big families: equity share capital and preference share capital.
Equity is what we all think of as the true owners, the ultimate risk takers. The sources say there are two main types.
Right. You have your standard, or as the source calls it, plain vanilla equity shares. These give you a voting right that's directly proportional to your paid-up capital. More money in, more votes. Simple.
And the other type.
Equity shares with differential rights. This is where it gets interesting. A company can issue shares with, say, higher dividends but fewer voting rights, or the opposite.
Why would they do that?
Founders often use it to raise capital without giving up control of the company. It's a strategic tool. But the law puts some pretty strict limits on it to make sure that a small group can't just dominate the entire company's governance structure.
Okay, so that's equity. Then we have preference shares. The name kind of gives it away.
It really does.
Yeah.
Their whole identity is built on two key preferential rights. First, they get paid dividends before the equity holders see a single rupee.
Priority on payment.
And second, if the company is wound up, they get their capital repaid before the equity holders. They're behind the debenture holders, sure, but they're way ahead of the common stockholders.
Which brings us to a really elegant conceptual point. Why is it impossible for a company to have only preference share capital?
I love this question. It's pure legal logic. The case was Bihar State Financial Corporation versus CIT Bihar. The term preferential means better than something else.
Right.
If you only have preference shares, who are they preferential over? The definition just collapses on itself. You have to have that base layer of ultimate risk capital,
Yeah.
the equity for the preference shares, to have any meaning at all.
That's a fantastic point. It establishes the hierarchy. Now, let's get into the details, the default settings for preference shares. The law makes two big assumptions if the company's articles are silent.
And these are so important because they determine risk if the contract isn't specific. The first is the presumption of non-participating.
Meaning?
It means unless it's explicitly written down, preference shareholders get their fixed dividend, and that's it. They don't get to share in any extra or surplus profits.
Yeah.
Their upside is capped.
So even if the company has a blockbuster year, they just get their, say, 8%.
Exactly. Their fixed return is just that fixed. The second presumption is the presumption of cumulative. This is a huge protection for them.
Okay, so what does cumulative mean in this context?
It means if the company doesn't have enough profit to pay their dividend 1 year, that dividend doesn't just disappear. It accumulates. It becomes a debt that the company owes them.
And they have to pay all those past due dividends before the equity shareholders can get anything in the future.
That's it exactly. It really reinforces their status as being somewhere between a lender and an owner. The law defaults to protecting their fixed return over time.
Okay, moving on from the types of capital to the power it wields. Let's talk about voting rights, Section 47. This is where the control of the company is decided.
It is. And for equity shareholders under Section 47, it's beautifully simple. One share, one vote on every single resolution. Their power is directly proportional to their stake in the paid-up equity share capital. The people with the most skin in the game get the biggest say.
And preference shareholders are generally on the sidelines.
Very much so. Under Section 47(2), their voting is restricted. They can only vote on resolutions that directly affect the rights attached to their preference shares. So a vote on changing their dividend rate? They vote.
Yeah.
A vote on a new CEO? They don't.
And this is where it's really interesting. The law gives them a weapon, a huge one, if the company starts to fail them.
This is the genius of the Act's protective mechanism. If their dividend hasn't been paid for 2 years or more, their status completely transforms.
So?
They suddenly get the right to vote on all resolutions.
Yeah.
Everything, just like an equity shareholder.
Wow, that's a corporate nuclear option. What does that do to a company?
It can cause chaos for management. Suddenly you have this large, angry block of shareholders who were previously silent, and now they have a say in every decision. It's a massive statutory penalty. It forces the board to be accountable. The law is basically saying, pay your debts or you lose exclusive control. It's a powerful, powerful tool.
That really clarifies the power dynamic. Now, what if the company wants to change the rules of the game? I'm talking about the variation of shareholders' rights, Section 48. Let's say you want to change a key right for a certain class of shares. It can't be easy.
It's incredibly difficult, and for good reason.
Yeah.
You're trying to alter a fundamental property right. You can't just have a simple majority steamroll a minority class. There are 3 conditions, and we can remember them with the mnemonic VST.
Okay, let's break down VST. What's V?
V is for validity check. First, you have to look at the company's constitution, the memorandum and articles. Does it actually allow for this kind of variation? Or, at the very least, does it not prohibit it? If you fail this first check, you can't even start.
Okay, so you've checked the documents. What's S?
S is for special consent. You need the approval of the holders of at least 75% of the issued shares of that specific class, not the whole company, just the class being affected.
A supermajority within the affected group.
Exactly. And even then, there's one more layer of protection. That's T for tribunal appeal.
So even if 75% agree, the dissenters still have a voice.
They do, provided they represent at least 10% of that class. They can appeal to the tribunal within 21 days, arguing the variation is unfair. The whole process is put on hold until the tribunal makes a decision. It's a powerful check and balance.
And there's a ripple effect too, right? If changing Class A's rights hurts Class B.
Then Class B also has to give it 75% consent. That's the proviso to Section 48(1). The law protects against indirect harm just as much as direct harm.
Okay, let's shift from rights to obligations, specifically getting the money that was promised. Let's talk calls on shares, Sections 49, Tab 51. This is how a company collects on partly paid-up shares.
Right, and the core principle here under Section 49 is uniformity.
Why is that so important?
It's just basic fairness. You can't call for 5 rupees from one shareholder and 8 rupees from another if they're in the same class. The call has to be made on a uniform basis to prevent the board from discriminating against certain members.
But the definition of same class can be a bit tricky here. What if you have 2 shareholders, both with 100 rupee shares, but one has paid 80 and the other has only paid 55.
Ah, for the purposes of a call, they are considered to be in different classes. You can't just make a uniform call for, say, another 10 rupees on both.
So what do you do?
You first have to make a call of 25 rupees on the person who only paid 55. You have to bring them up to the same level as the other shareholder first. Once they're both at 80 rupees paid up, then you can make a uniform call on both of them. It's about ensuring parity.
That makes sense. Now, what about shareholders who want to pay early? That's calls in advance, Section 50.
A company can accept that money if its articles allow it. It's good for their cash flow. But there's a big catch.
And what's that?
The member who pays in advance does not get extra voting rights because of it.
Ah.
Their voting rights are still based on the amount that has been formally called up by the company, not the amount they voluntarily paid. The law prevents someone from essentially buying extra influence ahead of schedule.
So it's a financial transaction, not a political one.
Precisely. And finally, under Section 51, when it comes to dividends, the company can, if its articles allow, pay dividends in proportion to the amount paid up on each share, which is only fair. You get a return based on what you've actually invested.
Okay, let's move into segment 3. We're going from the abstract rights to the physical or digital proof of those rights, starting with the Certificate of Shares, Section 46. How important is this document legally?
It's fundamental. The certificate is prima facie evidence of the title. That's Latin for at first sight. It means unless someone can prove otherwise, this document is the definitive truth of ownership.
And because it's so important, the law is very specific about how it has to be signed and authenticated.
Extremely specific.
Mm.
For physical certificates, you can remember the signing requirements with the mnemonic TDC.
TDC, what does that stand for?
It needs to be signed by either 2 directors or 1 director and the company secretary. And if the company has a common seal, it has to be affixed. It's a formality that ensures high-level accountability.
Of course, these days, most shares are not in physical form, they're dematerialized. Where's the proof of title, then?
The proof is the record of the depository itself. That's the prima facie evidence of who the beneficial owner is. And the law is pushing everything this way. Even unlisted public companies are now required to dematerialize their securities to improve transparency and reduce fraud.
And if you do have a physical certificate and you lose it, the company has to issue a duplicate. What's the key safeguard there?
The new certificate must be stamped very clearly with the word duplicate. It's a warning to anyone who sees it that it's not the original. The law also sets strict timelines, 3 months for unlisted companies to issue it, but only 45 days for listed companies.
Okay, so that's proof of ownership. How does that ownership actually change hands? Let's talk transfer and transmission, Section 56. Transfer is the voluntary sale.
Right. And for a physical transfer, it's a paper-heavy process. You need a proper instrument of transfer that's Form SH4. It has to be signed by both the seller and the buyer, stamped and delivered to the company with the original certificate, all within 60 days.
And what happens if the shares are only partly paid? The process gets a bit more complicated.
It does, because the buyer is taking on a liability. If the seller applies for the transfer alone, the company has to hit pause. It must send a notice to the buyer, giving them 2 weeks to object. It's a consumer protection rule, really, to make sure the new owner knows they're on the hook for future calls.
And how is that different from transmission?
Transmission is completely different. It's an involuntary transfer by operation of law. We're talking about deaths, insolvency, that kind of thing.
So no sale, no contract.
Exactly, which is why no instrument of transfer is required. The company just acts on an intimation like seeing a death certificate or court order and updates the register. The process is much simpler because it's not a voluntary act.
The law seems obsessed with speed here.
Hmm.
What are the time periods for delivery of certificates?
They're very strict. For the first subscribers to the memorandum, it's 2 months from incorporation. For any new allotment, also 2 months. But for a transfer or transmission, it's faster, only 1 month. The company has to keep its records up to date.
Now for the nightmare scenario you mentioned, a forged transfer. You said it's a nullity, void from the start. What does that mean for everyone involved?
It means the transfer never legally happened. The original owner's name has to be put back on the register. They never lost their shares.
But what about the innocent person who bought the shares based on the forged document?
That's where the company gets into huge trouble. By registering the forged transfer, the company has essentially misled the public. So they have to compensate the innocent buyer for their loss while also restoring the shares to the original owner. It's a double hit, and it can be incredibly expensive. It's why these procedures are so rigid.
And that leads right into refusal of registration and appeal, Section 58. What if the company just says no to a transfer?
Well, for a public company, shares are supposed to be freely transferable, so they need a very good reason. Private companies can restrict transfers, but they can't just block them entirely. If they do refuse, there are strict timelines for an appeal to the tribunal. We can use the mnemonic TAC for this.
TAC. Let's start with a private company.
For a private company, they have 30 days to send you a refusal notice. Once you get it, you have 30 days to appeal. But if they never send the notice, your appeal window extends to 60 days from when you first submitted the documents.
And for a public company.
The timeline is a bit more generous for the shareholder. You have 60 days to appeal after getting a refusal, or 90 days if they never send one.
And the C in TAC.
That's compliance. Once the tribunal issues an order, the company has just 10 days to comply and register the transfer. The law ensures the final word is final and acted on quickly.
All right, let's move into segment 4, which is all about financial engineering, altering the value of capital. We'll start on the positive side, issuing shares at a premium under Section 52.
Right. So if a share with a face value of 10 rupees is issued for 100, that extra 90 rupees goes into a special protected account, the Securities Premium Account, or SPA.
And the law treats this account almost like it's share capital itself.
It does. It's not just general revenue you can use for anything. It's seen as a capital buffer for creditors, so its uses are very strictly limited by law.
Okay, so let's go through those permitted uses. There's a mnemonic for this one too, isn't there? BEPDR.
That's the one. It really highlights the capital nature of these expenses. So B is for issuing fully paid bonus shares. You're converting one type of capital reserve into another.
Okay.
E is for writing off preliminary expenses, the one-time costs of actually setting up the company. P is for writing off issue expenses or commissions for raising capital.
So costs related to capital. Makes sense.
Exactly. D is for paying the premium on the redemption of preference shares, or debentures. Again, a capital transaction. And finally, R is for purchasing its own shares, or reacquisition, what we call a buyback. All of these maintain or adjust the capital structure. They're not day-to-day operating costs.
Okay, now for the flip side. The prohibition on discount Section 53. Why is issuing shares for less than face value such a major no-no?
Because it instantly damages the company's capital base. If you issue a 10 rupee share for 8 rupees, you've created a 2 rupee deficit on day one. The law says any such issue is just void.
But there's a very specific, very important exception to this rule.
Yes, a modern, pragmatic override. A company can issue shares at a discount to its creditors as part of a formal debt restructuring scheme.
So if the company is in trouble.
Exactly. The logic is that it's better to convert some debt into discounted equity and save the company than to let the whole thing collapse because of this rigid rule. It's a safety valve.
And if you break this rule outside of that exception, the penalties are severe.
Oh, yeah. You have to refund all the money, plus 12% interest, and there are massive fines for the company and the officers involved.
Okay, let's shift gears to a more creative way of issuing shares. Sweat equity shares, Section 54. This isn't about cash. It's about rewarding intellectual capital.
Right. Sweat equity is defined as shares issued to directors or employees, either at a discount or, more importantly, for non-cash consideration.
Like what?
For providing know-how, transferring intellectual property rights, or some other kind of value addition. It's the law's way of recognizing that in the modern economy, an idea or a patent can be just as valuable as cash in the bank.
And how is this process regulated to make sure it's not abused?
You need a special resolution. And that resolution has to be incredibly transparent. It has to spell out the number of shares, the market price, exactly what the non-cash consideration is, and who's getting them.
And there are limits on how many can be issued. I see another mnemonic here, 5, 15, 25.
That's right. The annual limit is the hire of 15% of your existing paid-up capital, or an issue value of 5 crore rupees. The cumulative limit over the company's lifetime is 25% of the paid-up equity capital.
But there's an exception for startups.
A big one. For the first 10 years, a startup can issue up to 50% of its paid-up capital as sweat equity. It's a huge incentive to attract top talent.
And to make sure those talented people stick around.
There's a mandatory lock-in period. Sweat equity shares cannot be transferred for 3 years from the date they're allotted. It ensures people are committed to the long-term vision, not just looking for a quick payout.
Okay, on to segment 5, the big fundamental movements of capital. Let's start with raising more money, the further issue of share capital, Section 62. The default method is the rights issue.
And it's the default for a reason. It's the fairest. A rights issue must be offered to your existing equity shareholders first in proportion to what they already own. This protects them from having their stake diluted without their consent.
And they get a specific window to decide.
Yes, the offer has to be open for at least 15 days, but no more than 30 days. And crucially, the rights are renounceable.
Meaning they can sell their right to buy the new shares to someone else.
Exactly. So even if they don't have the cash to participate, they can still benefit.
Now, what if the company wants to offer shares to outsiders, a preferential allotment?
Then the bar gets much higher. You can't just do it with a board resolution. You need a special resolution from the shareholders. They have to approve bringing new people into the ownership group.
Okay, this next one is a really big deal. Government conversion. This is where the government can force a company to turn its loans into shares.
It's an extraordinary power, no question. If the government has given a loan or owns debentures in a company, it can order that debt to be converted into equity if it's deemed to be in the public interest.
Even if the original loan agreement said nothing about conversion.
Even then, it's a complete override of the private contract. You usually see this in critical sectors like infrastructure or banking, where a company's failure would have massive public consequences.
That sounds like it could be used as a backdoor nationalization. What's the company's recourse?
There is a vital safeguard. The company can appeal the order to the tribunal within 60 days. The tribunal acts as a judicial check, weighing the public interest claim against the company's rights.
Okay, let's move from that to something more positive for shareholders. The issue of bonus shares, Section 63.
This is essentially capitalizing a company's profits or reserves and distributing them to shareholders as new, fully paid-up shares free of cost. But again, there are very strict conditions. We have a mnemonic for this, ARDSFN.
All right, let's walk through ARDSFN.
Articles must authorize it. Recommendation by the board, approved in a general meeting. D, no default on any of your debt payments. S, no default on statutory dues to employees like Provident Fund or gratuity.
So the company has to be financially healthy and compliant.
Absolutely. F, any partly paid shares must be made, fully paid up first. And N, once you've announced a bonus issue, it cannot be withdrawn.
And the one thing you absolutely can't do,
You cannot issue bonus shares in lieu of a dividend. The law sees them as fundamentally different things. One is a capital adjustment, the other is a distribution of profit, and you can't mix them up.
Now for the most difficult move of all, reduction of share capital, Section 66. This goes against the whole idea of protecting capital for creditors.
Which is why it's so heavily regulated. You need a special resolution, and you absolutely must get tribunal confirmation. The tribunal's main job here is to act as the guardian of the creditors.
And the main reasons for a reduction are things like canceling lost capital or paying off capital the company no longer needs.
Right. And before the tribunal approves anything, it has to be completely satisfied that every single creditor has either been paid off, has had their debt secured, or has formally consented to the reduction. It's an incredibly high bar.
Finally, let's talk about the company returning cash by doing a buyback of securities, Section 68. Where can the money for a buyback come from?
Only three places: your free reserves, the securities premium account, or the proceeds of a new issue of different shares or securities. You can't, for example, issue new equity to buy back old equity.
And who authorizes it? Is it the board or the shareholders?
It depends on the size. For a small buyback, up to 10% of your paid-up equity and free reserves, a board resolution is enough. For anything larger, up to the 25% cap, you need a special resolution from the shareholders.
And the directors have to put their necks on the line with the declaration of solvency.
Yes, they have to sign a legal document, Form SH9, swearing that the company will not be made insolvent by the buyback for at least the next 12 months.
And what happens to the shares once they're bought back?
This is a crucial step. They must be extinguished and physically destroyed within 7 days. This proves that the capital has actually been reduced permanently.
And there are some hard prohibitions, too. You can't use a subsidiary to do a buyback, for instance.
Right, and you can't do one if you've defaulted on any major payments like loans, deposits, or dividends in the last 3 years. Even if you've fixed the default, that 3-year cooling-off period is mandatory.
Okay, we've covered equity thoroughly. Let's spend our last segment on the other side. Debt, specifically debentures, Section 71.
Right. The first key point is that debentures can be issued with an option to convert into shares. It's a popular feature, but it has to be authorized by a special resolution.
But there is one thing that a debenture can never, ever have.
The absolute ironclad rule in subsection 2. No company shall issue any debentures carrying any voting rights. Lenders do not get a say in running the company. period.
And if the debentures are secured, there are rules about their lifespan.
Yes, the maximum term is generally 10 years, but there's a big exception for infrastructure projects where they can go up to 30 years, recognizing the long-term nature of those investments. And that security has to be held by a debenture trustee.
To protect the principal repayment, companies often have to create a debenture redemption reserve, or DRR. What's the logic here?
It's essentially a mandatory savings account. The company is forced to set aside a portion of its profits every year, specifically for the purpose of repaying the debentures when they mature. That money can't be touched for anything else.
And who needs to create one?
Generally, unlisted companies have to create a DRR for 10% of their outstanding debentures. Most listed companies and financial institutions are exempt, mainly because they're already under other heavy regulations.
And beyond the reserve, there's also an investment requirement.
Right. Every year, by April 30th, the company has to invest 15% of the amount of debentures that are maturing in the next financial year into safe specified securities. This makes sure the liquid cash is actually there when the bill comes due.
Now, you mentioned the debenture trustee. This is the watchdog for the debenture holders. The law is very strict about who can't be a trustee to avoid conflicts of interest.
Extremely strict. You can't be a promoter, director, or KMP of the company. You can't be indebted to the company. You can't have a significant pecuniary relationship with them. The idea is to ensure total independence.
The trustee has to be on the side of the debenture holders, not management.
Absolutely. And you can't escape that responsibility.
Yeah.
Any clause in the trust deed that tries to exempt the trustee from liability for being negligent is automatically void. They have to exercise a high degree of care.
And if all else fails and the company defaults on payment, what's the ultimate remedy?
The debenture holders can go straight to the tribunal, which can order the company to redeem the debentures forthwith, plus interest. They can also go to court to seek specific performance of the contract, forcing the company to pay up. The law gives lenders powerful tools to collect their debt.
That was an incredibly thorough tour of the entire capital structure, from the smallest unit of ownership to the most secure forms of debt.
We really saw the two sides of the coin. Equity is about risk and control. Debt is about security and a fixed return with zero control. And the whole legal framework, with all its mnemonics like BEPDR and VST, is designed to keep those two worlds in their proper lanes and protect all the stakeholders involved.
Right. The Companies Act really acts as this detailed manual for financial integrity.
It does. It tries to anticipate all the ways things can go wrong and build in protections, whether it's for creditors, minority shareholders, or the company itself.
Which leaves us with one final provocative thought for today. We talked about Section 70 and that strict 3-year penalty box a company has put in after a default before it can do a buyback. So here's the question. In today's world, with tech companies that can grow or fail incredibly quickly, is a fixed 3-year period still the right approach? Should that statutory cooling-off period be shorter for a company whose assets are mostly intangible, like Trisha Data Security Limited, compared to a big industrial company with long-term physical assets, like Shankar Portland Cement Limited? Does a one-size-fits-all timeline for financial rehabilitation really make sense anymore? Something for you to think about. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into share capital and debentures. We'll see you next time.